This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. Hey, what's up, everybody? Did an interview with JP ACOSTA going over this year's draft class. JP is one of the best NFL sports writers out there, and one of the most knowledgeable people about the draft, about the NFL, about football in general you can find. So really hope you enjoy this. We're going to go about an hour here just talking about draft prospects. And don't worry, we did another part of this interview talking about potential bridge quarterbacks that are in the NFL that might make sense for the Cleveland Browns. Let's jump into it. JP, let's talk about these young guys, man.
All right.
Let's talk about these young guys. Now, I think the way that we view these draft classes is interesting, right? Because, I think we're already determining that 2026 is the Arch Manning draft. We have barely seen Arch Manning play football in the SEC, but, the last name Manning is going to do a lot of weight with that, and maybe he plays well next year when he gets to start full time. But when you look at these next three sets of draft classes, right, because I think it's very hard to get a gauge on 2027, right? Because Dylan Raiola is really the only guy that you're getting a good look at that might be in that class, because it's just so rare for players to even play their true freshman year. How do you gauge this? Because I know that this class is not considered strong at quarterback, but are we three bad Arch Manning games away in 2026 from being well, that class stinks too?
Well, I think the thing with 2026 is you potentially have two guys who could enter 2025 but should probably return in Penn State's Drew Aller and LSU's Garrett Nussmeier. I think Nussmeier is interesting because LSU's bringing in a guy, Bryce Underwood, who is the number one recruit in the country and looks really good. He looks like one of those dudes. So I wonder what LSU does if Nussmeier does return. But if we look at 2026, obviously Arch Manning is going to be the name that brings up a lot of attention. Nico Yamaleava, who is still incredibly talented, but a lot of stuff needs to get ironed out in between now and then. Eli Holstein from Pitt is a guy that I'm really high on. I like how he plays. He's got a little bit of recklessness to him, but he plays within the control of a Pitt offense that actually looks good with him at quarterback. And then the biggest thing with Aller and Nussmeier, I think Nussmeier has shown good pocket movement and ability to maneuver. I just worry about the arm strength. I really do. I think there are some passes that he ends up just fluttering, and every time he has to be perfect with his timing just to get the ball out. And then Aller, I just need him to be more consistent of a passer. Penn State does a lot of weird stuff in the offense, where they're doing a lot of trick plays, formations, and it never actually lets him throw the ball. So I wonder if they'll let him throw the ball next year when he stays. But 2026, I think, has a chance to be pretty fun. But again, we're looking at maybe the year after that with Raiola and DJ Lagway, who I think is going to be very good. I mean, I'd say right now, Lagway is one of the most talented throwers of the football, just in terms of pure arm strength and velocity. He can flat-footed probably throw the ball out the stadium. Obviously, messed up his hamstring against Georgia, but he might play against Texas. So we're looking at those guys. I think a sleeper is Tulane's Darian Mensah. Tulane actually runs a legitimate NFL-looking offense. They do a lot of high lows, a lot of under center stuff. He's operated that offense really well. I want to know if he's actually going to end up transferring up higher, because I don't know if Joe Craddock, the offensive coordinator, will stay. But he's a big dude, 6'3". Like I said, operates that offense really well, throws a lot of high lows. I wouldn't be surprised if we come around 2026 and maybe Mensah is the guy that we end up looking at as he is the next one up. He's going to be a redshirt sophomore that next year, so he'll be eligible for the draft. But if I'm picking anybody outside of Arch Manning to be the guy that we all fall in love with, it's definitely Darian Mensah.
Darian Mensah. All right, now let's get to 2025 because it's an interesting class. Like, usually when a draft class at quarterback is bad, you can usually tell because none of the quarterbacks in that draft class are even close to Heisman Trophy candidates or anything like that, right? It's like the one year you knew what Mac Jones was in the Heisman Trophy thing, but it was really what he lost it to his wide receiver. So it's like it wasn't really like he was the main thing there. This year's a little different, right? These are guys who are good college players, right? Cam Ward, Shadeur Sanders. We'll start with Shadeur because I think he's probably going to be the most talked about prospect in this class. Do you feel comfortable with him as a first round pick? And is that the same as feeling comfortable with him as a top 5 pick?
So I am comfortable with him being a first round pick. I think right now I would say he's around mid to late first round to me. Mm-hmm. Top 5, he's definitely going to get pushed into the top 5 because of the QB tax. Every team is going to try and draft a quarterback early. So he's probably going to end up going top 5. But he is unquestionably QB1 in this draft to me. My biggest issues with him would just be there are some times where he doesn't trust his offensive line and he'll kind of go into work for himself, which you can possibly see as developing some bad habits. I think his arm is merely good enough. It's not elite. It's not great by any means, but it's good enough. He shows really good deep ball accuracy. He is such a good touch thrower where he just layers passes up and over. And I'm not comparing him to this guy in terms of instant impact or what he's going to be at the NFL level, but it's almost kind of like CJ Stroud when he's with his ability to get a pass over underneath defender and into the hands of a guy over the middle of the field. He's willing to work the middle of the field. I'm comfortable with him being a first round draft pick, but I don't know if I would say top 5.
How do you view the stuff from when we saw him go up against like the ranked opponents last year in the Pac-12 versus what he's had to play this year in the Big 12, which is like you have to play who's on your schedule. But the schedule was much tougher last year than it is this year, and he looks significantly better. Part of that is he got better over the break, but like, how do you judge how much of that is he got better versus the competition might not be what it was last year in the Pac-12, which was one of the strongest conferences in college football before it collapsed?
Yeah, so I think that the Pac-12 obviously was really strong last year, but the way I see it is Shadeur Sanders' ability when you watched how he plays, he has grown a lot. Mm-hmm. Even when I talk about like sometimes he'll go into work for himself in the pocket, he has grown so much in his ability to hang in there and throw the ball. He's one of the toughest quarterbacks in college football right now because he is going to get whacked a lot by an offensive line that hasn't really grown or matured with him in the passing game. And so it's tough, obviously, because the Big 12 isn't exactly what the Pac-12 was last year, but there's still quality opponents that are going to show you a lot of different looks. I think Kansas State gave him a lot of different questions that he had to answer. Dave Aranda at Baylor is always going to be a good defensive mind. And so I think they've asked a lot of questions of him. And for the most part, he's answered all those questions really well.
Now, do you feel like he can, because right now he kind of like rolls out a lot and he does some of the stuff that he could do because he's a good enough athlete at the college level to get away with it. But when I watch him personally, I don't see somebody who's going to be able to, he's going to have to adjust a little bit to how he plays in the NFL. Do you see him as somebody who can get comfortable climbing in the pocket and kind of like not relying on rolling out of these kind of messy pockets? Because that seems to be something that he does. And the only reason I'm concerned about it is because I don't think he's a great enough athlete at the NFL level to get away with it.
So I actually think he will. And I think he rolls out largely because of how the offensive line has just kind of fallen apart in front of him. He's kind of had to do that. But of course, competition and level of competition has to be taken into account. But when he was at Jackson State, he was not a guy that wanted to roll out or run a lot. He's not a scrambler at all. He wants to sit in the pocket, move up, go from 1 to 2 to 3. But a lot of times at Colorado, that pocket is falling apart. So he has to either stand in and get destroyed or he has to roll out and try and make every play an off script one. I think he can work off script, but that's not his best aspect of his game. When he's working within the flow of the offense, within like his world of being a true pocket passer, he is a pocket passer. He is not a guy who he does scramble, but he does not want to win that way. So I think he can step up in the pocket and continue to be a true pocket passer, but it's just for a prospective NFL coach wanting to bring in Shadeur Sanders. You have to try and make sure that none of the scar tissue from getting hit as much as he did and all the bailing out he did, some of the bailing out that he did, you have to make sure that doesn't translate to where he's bailing on clean pockets, because when he bails right now, he's not necessarily bailing on a lot of clean pockets. It is things are falling apart, but at the NFL level, things are going to move so much quicker, and that scar tissue, like I said, can develop really quickly. So you just got to make sure that he's not developing those bad habits at the NFL level.
Is he a player you could play right away? Or is he somebody because there's two parts of this conversation with Shadeur. He's very popular. Your fan base, if you draft him, is going to want to play him, especially if you draft him in the first round, right? Like, there are going to be a lot of people who want to see him hit the field. There's going to be tangible pressure to put him on the field, and that might put him on the field early. And also, it's like, is he the kind of player, like, when I look at Jaylen Milroe, I'm like, that's obviously a player that would benefit from not playing for a year, right? And like getting to work on like some of his mechanics. Is Shadeur that kind of player, or is he somebody you're like, you might just want to see once he gets to a comfortable level in the offense, what he can do out there, sooner rather than just like giving him like a standard year to wait?
So I think it really depends on who drafts him. If we're looking from the Browns' perspective, I think the offensive line, I think it's played a little better recently. I think they've shown the ability to play well. So if they were to draft Shadeur Sanders, I would say, yeah, I think you can start Shadeur right away in that offense, because I think he fits that offense the best out of any quarterback that is going to enter the 2025 draft. But for anybody else in that top 5-7 range that wants to add a quarterback, I would advise against it, because most of the time those offensive lines are going to be really, really bad. And most of the time the offensive line is not going to help Shadeur Sanders, like we said, with scar tissue of bailing on or having to bail on the pocket because of pressure. So I would say you can start him early, but it depends on the situation and what you already have. I think that is the biggest thing when it comes to adding a rookie quarterback. It is you have to have play calling, playmakers, and protection. And I think for Shadeur, you need those three things to start him immediately, and you can do that. But for me, if you're a team like the Titans, I wouldn't start him early.
Now, there's another conversation because his last name is Sanders, right? And Deion has obviously been a huge part to his name. And I don't want to make it seem like it's a LeVar Ball situation, right? Because I think it's very different than like just having a personality out there that's the father of this player. Deion Sanders is also somebody who, for better or worse, in his son's career, has been willing to use his name and his clout to advance or do what he feels like is best for his son's football career. That's been the case in high school, Prime Academy. That was the case at Jackson. Shadeur was a 3-star coming out. Didn't really have a lot of places where he would start immediately. I think he had an offer from Florida Atlantic, right, when Lane Kiffin was
He was
there.
committed to Florida Atlantic for like the longest until Deion took the job at Jackson State.
Yeah, and then he clearly got to start there at Jackson State. And then Deion makes the move to Colorado. I mean, Shadeur's there at the introductory press conference, right? So you think about this move to the NFL, obviously it would be a lot harder for Deion to exert that amount of control in the NFL. But you have to imagine he's going to play a role in some of this, right? Like the extent to that role, I don't know. And the question to me is like, are NFL GMs going to feel like that's worth the risk to go after Shadeur just as a prospect?
It's a really good question, and I think teams are willing, and I think it's largely because of what we've seen in 2024. If you need a quarterback, you're not gonna get one from the bridge guys. You might not get that guy. I mean, Sam Darnold's on a 1-year deal. If you're hoping to get Sam Darnold, then I don't know if that's going to work out for you. So you have to go get a guy at quarterback. Of course, the Deion Sanders of it all is going to be very interesting to watch. And he said in the offseason, like, he would try and make sure his son and Travis Hunter get to play somewhere where he would want them to play. But overall, I think we assume that Deion Sanders is going to be like this, someone who's so overpowering in this situation. But Deion Sanders still might have a job coaching college football at this time next year. He might not have that.
The most interesting, because I'm like, what is he going to do? Because it seems like everything in his college football coaching career has been about like his son and by proxy Travis Hunter. And I'm like, what is he as, like, where does he continue to coach at Colorado? Like, it would shock me if he stayed there for like 5 more years at Colorado or something like that, just became the dude who coaches there, because it seems like so much of this, like, it doesn't seem like a coincidence that he's a coach and all of his years of coaching seem to follow every year his son's playing quarterback, high school to pro, to college.
It's an interesting thing to think about. I am an optimist, so I'm gonna believe, like, yeah, he might still have a job coaching college football by the time Shadeur's in the NFL. He has bigger fish to fry than worrying about what his son is doing on a week by week basis. But I think when you talk about Shadeur Sanders and the Deion Sanders of it all, the biggest thing is just, you're acknowledging that stuff is going to happen when you're the son of an NFL Hall of Famer. I mean, we haven't really seen this in the NFL. When you're the son of an NFL Hall of Famer playing at the most important position in the sport, we haven't really seen that in the NFL.
Especially when, of course, like, it's not like an Arch Manning.
I was going to say, like, the closest we've gotten to it are the Mannings, but Archie Manning was not Deion Sanders caliber of player. So even in that situation, like, Peyton went 1 overall to the Colts, and I think they would draft him again every single time. So I think for an NFL franchise, they acknowledge that, Deion is going to be around. Deion is going to be a big name and kind of this presence. But if you need a quarterback, you can't sit here and just go like, well, his dad is super involved, I'm not going to draft him. Like, that's a really bad process.
Who do you like? Do you think it would be like front offices that are more established that stay away from that, or the ones that are just like brand new that would be like more welcoming to bringing to inviting that potentially on there, right? With Deion out there, because also, like, the thing with Deion, like, he don't got a coach. Like, that's the thing. He could just pull a Magic Johnson and say, I'm going to go back to being Deion Sanders. And that might mean he's on the panel on NFL on CBS or something like that, right? Or, like, there are so many different ways this can go, because I don't think the end game for Deion is to coach in the NFL. I don't think he wants it. That's an actual job. Like, that's not fun for Deion. Like, they're not going to talk to you the same way they talk to you in Colorado. Like, being Deion Sanders just ain't gonna carry as much weight in the NFL when they all millionaires too, right? So that won't be as fun for him. I don't think that's the end game for him, but I do wonder, like, is he going to be somebody who leads the committee to get a coach fired, right? Like, because he don't think that or an offensive coordinator fired, right? Like, is he somebody who starts to make a move, or, we see this more and more where family members decide to, Chris Olave's family member just went viral for saying he should leave New Orleans or something like. I think, especially when you're talking about small market fan bases, that's the biggest fear, I think, in a lot of small market fan bases, is that Deion, that Shadeur is good, but Deion does not like the situation. So Deion forces Shadeur, or finds a way to force Shadeur out of that time. Like, do you think Deion's going to go to that extent? And do you think Deion's going to be as market obsessed as people assume that he's going to be? Because I don't think those are the concerns with Deion.
I don't think the concern should be at all about markets. with Deion Sanders. Deion Sanders is the market.
Yeah.
That is
He
like
out
he
there
is
in Boulder
Deion
right
Sanders.
now.
Yeah,
Like
they got they got Lil Baby out at Boulder, Colorado. Deion Sanders is what brings people there. I think I'd be more concerned if, I mean, of course, we just spend like time like it's not about market, but a bigger market team probably would kind of shy away from it
mm-hmm,
just because, you don't want a situation where, Dion tweets and all of a sudden it's on the front page of the news.
mm-hmm.
And that's where you get the media circus from. But I really don't think it's going to be that big of a problem. I think a team that is, again, desperate for a quarterback. If you're desperate enough to draft a quarterback in the first round, you're probably desperate for a quarterback. And then a franchise that I think is still relatively like with a younger GM, I think they'd be more willing to do it. But I think even above the GM, it comes down to ownership. And are the owners going to want the I'm not going to call it a circus because I don't think that's
Mm.
fair to Deion Sanders, but are they going to want to
Have that
have all
attention.
the not only all that attention, but all the scrutiny that comes
Yeah.
with Deion Sanders being there. So it's really going to come down to ownership because GMs, like from a football standpoint, they have to win games. And if Shadeur Sanders is going to be the guy who wins you football games, you draft him, regardless of who his family is.
Yeah, I just think weighing that whole thing is interesting to me with Dion, and it's going to be interesting how he tries to handle this draft process, how they try to go about that. Because the only other examples I could think of is like the Ball brothers, and they're not really 1-to-1, right? Like LeVar Ball was just famous because his kids were good at basketball.
Yeah.
But it's like some of them, like what Lonzo was much more willing to go with Lamar doing the LeVar show and not saying anything. LaMelo was just like, nah, I'm done, dog. Like, we're not doing this. Once I turn 18, I'm going to high school. I'm going to a real like, I'm going to go and get out of here and do this thing normal and not like wear the Ball brothers shoes and stuff like that. So it can really go a bunch of different ways. I don't know where Shadeur is when it comes to that stuff. I think he's going to test really well. Like if he does like the interviews at the Senior Bowl, I think he's going to do fantastic in that setting. Because I think one thing that people are underestimating is that the one thing Deion Sanders knows how to do is talk to money. Right, like that's that is the number one thing. He knows how to talk to people who own stuff that sponsor stuff, right? And he is going to be able to be an excellent mentor to both Travis Hunter and Shadeur. Like that, those kids are going to be super prepared when it comes to that. Now let's move on to Cam Ward, who I think is the other most divisive guy out here. Because I was talking about this with Cole, and I was like, see, the thing about Cam Ward is that people will call him Zach Wilson, but then you watch him in college, you're like, he's better than Zach Wilson ever was in college. Then you remember Zach Wilson was 20. Like,
yeah.
Cam Ward is 23. And like, I watched him, and there are times when I watch him, I'm like, man, he could throw that ball. And there are times I see him throw across the field for like a 5-yard completion at a time of the game where I'm like, why would you even try that? And it turns into a pick six. I think that happened against Duke, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, the same reason Miami is undefeated sometimes feels like the same reason they only win these games by 1 or 2 scores.
Cam Ward, so I said it on Saturday. Cam Ward playing style, like stylistically, reminds me of Jordan Love in just the aggression, throwing the ball downfield, the overconfidence in his arm, which sometimes will backfire, but that's the game that you play. But the problem is Jordan Love was had a significantly stronger arm and was also only 20 years old when he entered the draft. So you could sit him for a long time. Cam Ward is 23. Cam Ward is 24. Like he's been in college football for a long time. You worry about it becoming Zach Wilson because of the over-reliance on the off-schedule stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The over-reliance on making this play out of the pocket. He's not necessarily the best at reading out from the pocket. And so you're relying on all the stuff that happens outside the pocket to be the biggest plays. And there's some really high variance stuff that happens with that. The touchdown to one of the touchdowns to Xavier Restrepo against Duke. The Duke player tips the ball. Like that's some of the variance that happens. And Restrepo just catches it. Like it's that kind of stuff where it's like it worked, but I don't want you to do this. So I just think sometimes this process is really, really weird, but the high level stuff is incredibly high level. But the
Mm-hmm.
bad is so, so, so bad.
You know what it reminds me of? It's like what if Jameis Winston came out of college, but you didn't have that 2013 season, right?
Yeah.
Like you only had the 2014 season.
Yes. Like only 2014. But even Jameis was like 22.
Yes, and
Like
that's the biggest thing with Cam Ward. I'm like, yeah, when I think about it, I'm like, he's just a college player, and I'm like, okay, that makes sense. I think Jameis, what he was a redshirt freshman. He left his redshirt sophomore year, right? Like,
yeah.
so he was super young, and that's the thing. It's like usually you could live with a player playing like that when they ain't in their fifth year, right? And he done
Yeah.
played so much football, and it's like that's the thing that's concerned is like he's played so much football in his career and he still does some of this stuff. Is this just who he is? Like, is there any coaching this out of him? Because I think that's when you look at Cam Ward is like the prospect stuff versus the projection and what he did in college. That's where it starts to get kind of dicey because I'm like, I don't know, man. Like,
So to Ward's to Ward's credit, I think he's actually 22. So he is 22 years old.
mm-hmm.
He was a wing T quarterback in high school. So he didn't really get a lot of reps actually running like a true passing game. Went to Incarnate Word, obviously played really well there, but it's Incarnate Word. Then
Mm-hmm.
goes to Washington State. That's where Cam Ward first pops up. And now he's at Miami, where everything around him has seemingly been the best in his entire life playing football. So he has grown as the surroundings have gotten better around him. So I think that'll play really well to a lot of NFL coaches and NFL QB rooms who can say, "Oh, all this off schedule stuff, it might not work in the NFL. You might not be able to read some of the NFL defenses at a high level yet, but with the development track that he is on, maybe you can turn it into something. Maybe there's something there." Again, I think Ward's arm is good enough. It's not elite by any means. I think he's able to throw from a lot of different cool arm angles. And again, that's where we kind of get into the Zach Wilson of it all, where it's like
Mm-hmm.
Zach Wilson's arm isn't that great, but he throws with a lot of really cool arm angles and he's able to make plays out of the pocket. So, how do we parse that? How do we parse the out of structure stuff between some of the inconsistencies within structure? I would I would say right now Ward probably is around the late one, early two for me. I'd say more early two. But again, QB tax, he's going to go really high.
Is Quinn Ewers only talked about in the first and second round conversation because he's been Quinn Ewers? Like he was like a big name 5-star? Or like is it justified him being a potential first round prospect?
Absolutely not. First of all, no, I would not draft him in the first or second round. Honestly, I think Quinn Ewers, like you said, 5-star recruit. The Alabama game last year, and then the Michigan game this year.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the two best games Quinn Ewers has ever played. But
Michigan
you
game
have
this year just keeps looking less and less when you look at how
Michigan,
yes.
And again, if you realize what Michigan is this year, it don't look that great. Yeah. The problem with Quinn Ewers is he cannot and is not going to throw the ball deep. He is incredibly skittish under pressure. Georgia understood he is not very good under pressure and basically beat him into a pulp. A lot of his passes are behind the line of scrimmage. A lot of them are screens, they're checkdowns. I'm worried that the offense kind of babies him. Not kind of babies him. I'm worried that the offense babies him. Is it because the offense is just trying to make the easiest throws for him, or is it because he just cannot throw the ball downfield? On top of that, he has a very extensive injury history and is maybe only around like 190 pounds. So you factor all of these things in, and I just don't know if you get a first round quarterback. I don't know if you get a top 2-day quarterback. You know, like his play has not been very good this season, but you're gonna look at the Michigan game and you're gonna look at the Alabama game and be like, oh, well, where's that guy? Like, I can get that guy, but maybe that's just the best he's gonna be.
Is this a situation where like they've used other, like when they put Arch in, do they explore more of that downfield stuff? Like how much of the not attacking downfield feels like it's Quinn Ewers related? Because to me, it would be a big concern if you have a quarterback in college who's playing like Case Keenum, and Case Keenum ain't even play like Case Keenum in college, right? Like Case Keenum was throwing that ball downfield, right?
Yeah.
Like what does that even turn into in the NFL if you gotta tone it down to Case Keenum levels in college to be successful?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing you would hope for is Bo Nix. And we have seen what Bo Nix has been in the NFL this year. And even Bo Nix, I think, operates with better footwork than Quinn Ewers, at least in college. But the problem with Ewers is he just doesn't take those shots downfield unless they are wide ass open, unless the look isn't muddy. I think his arm is just good. I don't think it's elite. Again, I think it's got kind of the arm angle stuff, but the injury kind of took a little bit of his arm strength with him. I'm really worried about his play under pressure. That has been the biggest problem. He just kind of turtles on himself under pressure. He's not willing to throw the ball under pressure. It is always a sack or something chaotic happens, like an interception or a turnover. And that's the biggest thing. That's kind of the biggest indicator of college to NFL success is how you play under pressure, because the windows are going to be a lot closer in the NFL. So you got to make these decisions quicker. You have to either win with your mind or your arm or your legs. And Ewers doesn't do any of that unless it is schemed up by Steve Sarkisian.
Quinn Ewers or Kurtis Rourke?
Man. I'm going to say Kurtis Rourke because I'm just a big fan of his, but even Kurtis Rourke has some of the issues where older prospect, again, I think he's like 22 or 23.
He's 24 and he'll be 25 in October of next year.
Yeah. Older prospect, had a season-ending knee injury, has missed a lot of games this season for Indiana, so you have to worry about the injury issues. Again, I think the arm is just good and it's not great, but he does throw a really nice touch to every level of the field. He's also a statue in the pocket. He is not going to move around. So you really worry a little bit because he's such a big guy and he's such a statue that you get kind of Kyle Trasked by him. But he is making some really high level throws at Indiana. I think he's probably going to end up going on day 3, but I think I would rather see what Kurtis Rourke has because I know that he's going to attack downfield.
Now the biggest mystery box of this draft class, I think, is Jaylen Milroe. I have no idea. Look, after that Georgia game, I was like, I might have to take him.
The Georgia game, I was like, oh, absolutely.
Yeah, and then Tennessee happened. I'm like, oh boy, that was concerning. He melted down in the Tennessee game.
Not even just Tennessee, South Carolina they won that game, and I was like, I don't know, man. The thing about
was the
Jaylen,
back-to-back punch of like South Carolina happening, and I think it happened right after they lost to Vanderbilt too. Like it was just like an impossibly bad 3 weeks after having like the best week of your life.
Oh yeah, it's just a horrendous next few weeks. The thing about Jaylen Milroe is if he enters the NFL, he enters as one of the like 5 best athletes at the QB position. Yeah. I mean, he's like 6'3", 220, 230, but Nick Saban has said that he is the fastest player on the team, which, I mean, Nick Saban will obviously talk up a player that he coached, but if Nick Saban says it, I'll believe him. I'll take him.
I saw him outrun. When I saw him cut across the field in the middle of it against Georgia, I'm like, yeah, that's the fastest dude on the field.
That's fast dude on the field. He outran on one of the touchdowns. He outran Malachi Starks, who was going to be a first-round safety.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, well, yeah, that obviously there's the fastest guy on the team. Um, he has shown better process so far this season, but again, the ball placement is so rough. Even on the deep throws, it's a lot of the deep throws. It is Ryan Williams making a fantastic play, or somebody ended up having to make a contested catch, and it's just he doesn't. He has a strong arm, but he's always a little bit too late on the deep throw.
Mm-hmm.
So now you're stressing your arm a little bit too much. And he also doesn't have kind of the flexibility in his arm. I think biggest, the best thing for Jaylen Milroe to become at the NFL level would be a guy like Jalen Hurts, who they're very similar in terms of build and how they play. I think obviously Milroe is much faster, but in terms of how they throw the ball, they're both kind of robotic. They don't do a lot of stuff with arm angles. I think
They
Milroe has
squat they have a real deep squat in both of their throw motions. Like
they don't have the flexible arm angles because they are doing bicep curls with the linemen.
Yeah. Well, it's like when you watch Jaylen Milroe and when you watch Jalen Hurts, like it's like, you know how Jalen Hurts got that really weird stance at the line of scrimmage?
Yes.
And it's like Jaylen Milroe does that, but not at the line of scrimmage. He does that when he throws, because it's like these dudes stand up straight and you're like, oh my God, they are 6'2". But like when you watch them play, you're convinced they're like 6 foot because they get so deep into their drop, like squatting. Like it's kind of an awkward spot to throw a football out of.
It's weird. He also can get a little toesy. I think that's why, like, when he stands up straight, it's like, oh, you remember he's 6'2", because he's real toesy in the pocket. So then he has to come back down on all his points on his feet and then throw the ball, which is wasting a little bit of time in the NFL. And obviously wasting a little bit of the time in the NFL is the difference between a touchdown and maybe a 10-yard gain. So I think his ball placement just needs to be a lot better. And I think if you're drafting Jaylen Milroe, I'd say maybe day 2. That's where I draft a guy like Milroe, but he's gonna ace the interviews. I think that is a guy where if the NFL had a minor league, you draft and stash him. He is the NBA player that like the Thunder draft and keep him over in like Lithuania for a year and then bring him over when he's ready.
Yeah, what was it, like Sergei Karasev on the 76ers, who was like stashed forever over there. Like I look at him and I think the furthest he's gonna fall is the second round, because like somebody's gonna see that and be like, hey, you could do something with it, right? The question I have with Jaylen Milroe is also like, what do you think NFL GM's draft philosophies will be on it? Because they're gonna first try him out at quarterback. I don't think anybody's gonna go full Bill Polian and like try to make him play wide receiver or something like that, even if somebody will say it. Do you think somebody looks at Jaylen Milroe and thinks, worst case scenario, we could have like the craziest version of Taysom Hill with him? Like even if it doesn't work out full-time quarterback, it's like, oh boy, we could really have something there with like as a utility player.
Unless Sean Payton is doing the drafting again, I don't think we're ever going to see another guy like Taysom Hill in the NFL. I think he's going to get a lot of shots at quarterback. I just think his body type is really weird for a tight end, because he's 6'2". Like he's not like a super tall dude, but he's really built. He's a thicker guy. So I think he's going to get every chance in the NFL to succeed at quarterback. But if it doesn't work, I don't really see him playing any other position, just because I don't know if any teams are willing to make that risk.
He has a weird body type for football, period. Because like there's nowhere where you look at him where you're like, oh, he would be this, right? Like if Myles Garrett was not an edge rusher, he would be nothing other than an edge rusher, right? Or like maybe like the craziest looking tight end you've ever seen, or tackle. Like if he just picked up some extra weight, right? Like there are guys who look like they have football builds, right? Like what was it? Like Malik Willis. You're like, I can see a world where he was a running back, right? Like he's kind of built like he has the thick legs, he has the running back build. When I look at Jaylen Milroe, I'm like, I don't know what he would be other than a quarterback, right? Like when you look at his, because he's way too strong. Like, you don't see wide receivers that look like that. Running backs, like even the Derrick Henrys of the world, they're a little bit more lanky than that because they have to fit into those small gaps. He's too bulky. Like what? Even like what? Maybe linebacker in like 2005. Like maybe he would. Like
he would be like the perfect like strong safety.
Oh my
like
god!
You got to try him there. He's a box safety or like a will linebacker. Maybe a will linebacker. But
imagine that.
That'd be sick. That'd be whoever would move him to will linebacker would be fired the next day if I figured out about it. Like, what are you doing? You just dreamt of that, and I was like, let's see if it works in real life.
Because like as much as it was crazy for people to say like Heisman Trophy winner in a Bobby Petrino offense, Lamar Jackson should play wide receiver in the NFL. You could at least see it when you look at like if you knew nothing about Lamar Jackson, you'd be like, oh, he might play wide receiver. Like. He has that kind of lanky build to him, right? Like, he's like, okay. But Jaylen Milroe, man, he ain't built like no wide receiver. That's why like, he built like he could do kick returns really good. Like, or something like that. Like, he doesn't have like a specific position, which, I don't know. Like, if he doesn't work out as a quarterback, I kind of hope he goes to like the most creative person possible. Because I think there's got to be something you can get out of him if he doesn't work out at quarterback. I have no idea what that looks like, though.
Again, I would love to see him in an offense that's very similar to the Eagles and Jalen Hurts, where it's a lot of RPOs, it's a lot of the design QB run game, and then just let him throw the ball deep. I honestly even think a little bit an offense like Miami that's so spread out, and he can kind of maneuver within the pocket and kind of get better under pressure. I think that might work. But again, he is the guy where you don't start him right away. This is a draft and stash.
You want to give Miami the fastest quarterback in the NFL?
Yes, I do want to give Miami one of the fastest quarterbacks in the NFL. They tried with Lamar Jackson, did not get Lamar Jackson. Now I'm going to give you 235-pound quarterback who is just as fast as Lamar Jackson.
Could you imagine that? Like
they would be the greatest 4x1 team in NFL history.
I would be like, that legitimately would be the team on like they could run the triple option, get to the conference championship game.
Oh
like,
yeah,
for 1 year.
Just run the triple.
1 year, yeah, you do it for 1 year. You would have it. You have like the slot options too.
It's perfect because the Dolphins would need a backup quarterback. They can let Tua play out the contract if they're not sold on him. Mm-hmm. You let Milroe kind of sit and learn, figure it out. If they're not sold on Tua by the end of the contract, it's the Jordan Love situation.
All right, last guy I'm going to talk about here, Clemson quarterback Cade Klubnik. What do you think about Cade?
He actually is one of the bigger wild cards in this draft because if you just watch the Georgia game, you would think Cade Klubnik might be one of the worst quarterbacks in college football. But he has gotten so much better over the course of the season, and I think it's worth asking about if he can work in the NFL. He's a really good athlete. First of all, like he is a legitimate run threat. This is not a Daniel Jones where it's like, oh, he can pull a read option. No, he is a legitimate. You can design a run game with Cade Klubnik. But he's grown so much in the comfort of the offense that now he's showing off a little bit more confidence in his arm strength, his ability to test teams downfield. I'm cautiously intrigued by Cade Klubnik because everything that I've seen from Klubnik so far up to this point, like in 2023, it was really bad. And then the Georgia game was really bad. But since then, he's played really well. I think he is one of those guys where I think he should go back to school. But if he did enter the draft, I actually wouldn't mind it just because, he's put out some really good tape this year. So, and a team is going to go, I can do something with that.
What do you do with how poorly Carson Beck's 2024 has gone? as a
Oh boy.
prospect?
Oh man. The biggest thing for me, I had Carson Beck as my QB1 in the offseason. And the
Yeah.
biggest thing for Carson Beck was his ability to throw on schedule, on time, and accurate over the middle of the field. That has not shown up this year. He has been
Mm,
skittish. He's looked rattled at times. Like it looks like the confidence has gone. And that's the biggest thing for a quarterback. You can tell that he's kind of like, I don't know where to go with this ball. And
mm,
obviously, Georgia not having the playmakers to really help him out a lot has really hurt him. But man, it's rough because I think now he's probably played himself out of round one. I'd still draft him day two, but you're looking more at a guy. Maybe you can get a Jared Goff from him, but I think Jared Goff's arm is a lot stronger than Carson Beck's. I think his pocket movement might be a little better than Carson Beck's. So I wonder where he ends up getting drafted. I would just still draft him day two, but he is definitely a guy that might need a little more talent around him to actually be a competent NFL quarterback.
and quarterback draft projection like things are so difficult because like even when you go, you might be able to get like a Jared Goff out of him. Then you think about it, you're like, Jared Goff was a undoubted number one overall pick coming out of college.
Yeah, like we
that
forget, like
year.
you can get Jared Goff. And it's like Jared Goff still has a really strong arm and was a number one overall pick. Maybe you
Yeah.
get Kirk Cousins, but even Kirk has done so much better in terms of pocket movement, his
Mm-hmm.
accuracy, his ability to move defenders that I don't think Carson Beck has really done. So again, you're just hoping to get to that point.
Yeah, and it's like it's hard to get Kirk Cousins in the when you're trying to get Kirk Cousins in the first round, right? Like because
Yeah.
Kirk Cousins happened because you just drafted Kirk Cousins and you just turned into Kirk Cousins, right? Like same thing with like Dak or somebody like that. Like it's hard when you have to compare these guys. You're like, oh, okay, he reminds me of this guy who was a super like Brock Purdy's probably gonna have this happen, right? Oh, he could be Brock Purdy or something like that, and it's like yeah, but it's like trying to compare something to being what is the NFL equivalent to lightning in a bottle, right? Like it's
Yeah.
hard. It's why every quarterback who gets comped to like uh Kirk Cousins is doomed almost the second we start doing it because it's like what it happened with Kenny Pickett. They're like, oh, he could be Kirk Cousins, and then it's like, nah, man. Like it's once you're at that
Even
point where you're like, he could be lightning in a bottle. It's like it's probably not
and
going to happen,
even
especially at the way you want to in the first round.
even with Kenny Pickett, he was like you could get Kirk Cousins at if Kenny Pickett was at his best, at his physical peak, and everything was absolutely perfect. You could get Kirk Cousins. If you got to do all that, I don't know if he's a round one guy. And the thing with Beck is you can see that not having Brock Bowers and Lad McConkey has hurt his confidence.
Mm-hmm.
But now he's not trusting what he's seeing. And
Mm.
that's the biggest issue. His confidence has gotten shaken to the point where, like I said, he went from QB1 first round draft pick to a guy who might not even get picked on day one. So for him, I would want to see him go somewhere that uses a lot of play action, already has established play calling and playmakers. And then, like we said, you might be able to get Kirk Cousins. But again, you don't draft Kirk Cousins in the first round.
Yeah, it's a say it's been an amazing draft class to watch this year, especially at the quarterback position, because a lot of guys having good seasons, a lot of guys having disappointing seasons, but we're not even sure any of these guys are good, right? Like that's the thing about this year's
The
draft
best
class.
part about this.
It's
Best
like
part about this.
it's like they're like usually, well, not usually, but every once in a while you'd be like, okay, well, CJ Stroud's going to be good. It's just a question of like, is he the best guy in his draft class? It's also Bryce Young, you know. This is one where it's like, well, you know, it's going to be somebody who you like watching on Saturday. I can't guarantee what that experience is going to be like. I'll say, if you had to compare this draft class to any kind of recent draft class in the last 10 years, what would you compare it to?
I don't think it's as bad as 2022. I think 2022 didn't have any legitimate first round quarterbacks.
Mm-hmm.
Um, man, uh, I think you got to go back to which draft was it? Let me check. I think it was 2019. I think
2019.
2019 would be the draft that I'd be like,
Daniel
okay,
Jones,
Daniel
the
Jones, Kyler
Dwayne
Murray,
Haskins, Kyler
Dwayne
Murray.
Haskins. But even then, you have Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray is unquestionably QB1 in this draft. But then you get to a bunch of wild cards. You don't really know
Was
about
Justin
what we're
Fields in that draft?
No. Fields was
No,
2021.
it can't be because Dwayne Haskins was in that draft.
Yeah. Haskins. It was Haskins. Then it was Daniel Jones. Obviously Kyler in that draft. We had Will Grier, Ryan Finley, Jarrett Stidham, and Tyree Jackson, and Clayton Thorson, and Gardner Minshew and Easton Stick. So,
Gardner Minshew was
again,
in 2019.
Yes,
he feels so old.
He feels it's the mustache, man. It's the mustache and the receding hairline.
Because he came into the league old, right? Like he
came into the league old, and then he just kept looking older.
Let's see. I'm trying to think of, you know what? I have a comp for this draft class. It's like, what if Trevor Lawrence wasn't in the 2021 draft class?
I think that's a good one. I think that is a good one.
Because we got Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, Justin Fields, Mac Jones, Kyle Trask. Like, I think that is the best way I could put it.
And then we're kind of getting back. I don't think it's 2016 because Goff and Wentz were obviously like the top two. And there's only one QB that's like unquestionably QB1, but you got to go back like way back, maybe like 2014.
Yeah.
Where you get it's the Bortles and Teddy Bridgewater year where nobody really knows like who's going to go first. So I think 2014 is the best way to say it.
Yeah, because it's not as bad as 2013 was, right? Where EJ Manuel goes. You do get Geno Smith, but I mean, Geno Smith was a different Geno Smith at that time, like to what he had become. Yeah, and then it's no 2012. Good. Okay. 2011, another hilarious draft class. Like there's Cam Newton and then just a bunch of people.
Just the worst.
The worst. Blaine Gabbert's in there. Actually, it's not that bad of a draft class. Andy Dalton, Colin Kaepernick, with Ryan Mallett. Oof. Tyrod Taylor's in there.
The highs are high, but the lows are really low.
It was real hit or miss there. We're back to those kind of picks. But yeah, I think 2014, probably a good comp here too, right? Because I think there's going to be one guy out here. Like, do you feel comfortable Shadeur as Teddy Bridgewater in that comp? Well, Teddy Bridgewater's career is just so weird.
Teddy's career is weird, but I think he had a successful career by most standards. I mean, he played really well before he got hurt. I am confident in saying, well, I'm not confident. Well, I feel pretty sure that at least one of these quarterbacks will end up being good. Just because somebody's got to be good from this class. I mean,
there's enough of them playing at a high enough level in college that you have to assume one of them is going to be
at least one of them will pan out. I don't know which one, but at least one of them will pan out.
It's not like 2022 where you're like, yeah, I don't think any of these guys are going to work out. Like, just off rip.
2022 we'll punt for 2023.
Yeah. But that's an interesting conversation. I think a pretty in-depth preview of this draft class. I mean, we did everything except for like talk about like the true outliers in this draft classes. Like we're not like the Will Howards or the Kyle McCords or something like that. But any final thoughts before we head out here about this year's draft class, especially at the quarterback position? Or do you think that if you have a top 7 pick and maybe you're not dead set on one of these quarterbacks, who do you think are the 3 best playmakers you can get in this draft?
On both sides of the ball, the 3 best playmakers to me are Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter, edge from Penn State, and then Will Johnson, corner from Michigan. I think those 3 guys are really good defensive centerpieces. Honestly, this isn't really a great draft for. Well, actually, hold on. I'm gonna change that. The top three playmakers in this draft are Travis Hunter, Ashton Jeanty, and Will
I was
Johnson.
about to say, I was like, wait,
Yeah,
no Johnson.
I quickly forgot. But if you need a running back in this
I
draft
want to say,
class,
you cannot have the run the ball propaganda on.
no. I almost forgot about the running back class. Thank you for reminding. I love this running back class. I think this is if you need a guy at a running back spot, you better go get him early because Jonty right now he is my second ranked player in this
Really?
draft class. He is
second ranked. Okay.
yeah, second ranked, not second ranked running back, second ranked player. He is behind Travis Hunter. He is phenomenal. I mean, he breaks tackles. He's a great and willing pass protector. He's really good actually as a receiver. Like there's not a lot of holes you can pick in his game. I mean, he's still only 21, 22 years old. You worry a little bit about the tread on the tires, but he's still relatively young. I would draft him and I would make him a centerpiece of an offense. Caleb Johnson from Iowa might be my running back too. Again, really good zone runner, quick feet, makes guys miss. Omarion Hampton from North Carolina is really fun. If you need a running back, go get one. The two guys from Ohio State, Judkins and Henderson, both very physical players. They both want to block, and I think that is awesome. Travion Henderson is an amazing pass blocker. Devin Neal and RJ Harvey, both out of the Big 12, really fun to watch. Ollie Gordon is a cool player. I mean, I could just keep naming guys, but if you need a running back, go get one because the 2025 draft is loaded there.
This is something worth asking. If we think that the 2027 class could be the one that hits on quarterback, if you're a team and you're not in love with quarterback here, do you just decide to do what most teams refuse to commit to do, which I think is actually a solid strategy, and say, hey, we're not going to have a bridge quarterback. We're just going to have a bridge running back, and we're going to go and get a Jeanty and just put out a workable offense that runs through the running back position and then figure out the quarterback position next to that and then just kind of draft for the future there. Like, do you think that is a viable strategy to kind of just try to do the Saquon Barkley thing?
I think that is a good strategy, especially we see where the NFL is kind of shifting, where you see all these bridge quarterbacks. I mean, Minnesota is playing really good levels of football with Sam Darnold, but they have an Aaron Jones and a really good run game and the best receiver in football. So you look at these teams and you can see, like, if you have a good run game, you can make a lot of stuff shake. I mean, I think a lot of teams are going to copy the Detroit Lions model of drafting a lineman, building an offensive line, and have two really good running backs that you spend a lot of capital on. So it's worth it. And this is the great time to get one because there are so many really good running backs. And if you don't have a quarterback, you might as well, maybe take a chance with some of those bridge guys and build out your offensive line and try and run the ball and see what happens.
I am so close to just being like, well, guys, we could just get Jeanty.
Hey, you know what's better than having Nick Chubb and Jerome Ford? Nick Chubb and Ashton Jeanty.
Hey, it can't hurt.
You know what? It can't get worse.
Yeah, if you're worried about the expense at the quarterback position because Deshaun's the quarterback or Deshaun's getting paid, okay, we can mitigate that. He just don't got to be the main part of the offense, or he don't even got to be the dude handing the ball off. It could just be somebody else for cheap, and then just get somebody who can hit some pops off play action, and we out here.
Quarterback might not matter. The 49ers went to the Super Bowl twice, had a quarterback. They drafted the last pick in the NFL draft. Seahawks are getting good play out of Geno. The Vikings just paid Sam Darnold like on a 1-year deal. Maybe running backs matter.
Hey, look, we have basically used Nick Chubb as our bridge to nothing. I don't see the problem in just going with Jeanty. Especially if like Shadeur goes like 2 or something like that. Like, I don't know who Tennessee does it or something like that. It's like, okay, cool. We're just gonna go Jeanty.
Go ahead and draft a running back. See what happens.
But appreciate you, JP, for coming on, man. Well, if people want to check you out, check more of what you do out, where can they find you again?
You can find me at SB Nation. I write a column every week called Establish the Fun, where I write about 3 things in the NFL that I find are very fun to watch and things that you should be watching for when you turn on the TV on Sunday. Outside of that, I write about college football, write about the NFL, also at SB Nation. But just follow me at ACOSTA32_JP. See what I'm doing, see where I'm going.
Thank you, JP. And I want to thank everybody else for watching. Y'all have a great day. Have a better night. Peace.